Hello, ahoy there, I am Tiny Pirate. In front of you, you can see my players. Not all of my players, but my players in my campaign, in my Star Wars campaign. They are hanging around a pirate lair somewhere deep in outer space. They're trying to convince the pirates to join. And the pirates feature one of their old friends, an old flame of Max. But what exactly is going to happen with this crew, and how did they end up there in the first place? And that's really what I wanted to talk about tonight. So what I wanted to do is to talk a little bit about some of the interesting videos I've been watching and the theories that I've been reading about telling a story in an online role-playing game. And it's kind of been bugging me for a while, so I thought it might be fun to just randomly lecture on this topic. And I'm keen to have people who tune in lecture or sort of join on this discussion as well, because I think you'll have some interesting points. So when you go to build a campaign, it's pretty natural for an eager new game master or dungeon master to head off to YouTube and look up how to build role-playing stories. And I see a lot of discussion around the ideas of what is a sandbox game, what is a railroaded game, and the various pluses and minuses that go with that. But through most of the videos I've watched, I've actually seen really little practical advice on how to actually build an interesting setting and how to make it respond to the players in an interesting way. So I thought I'd talk about that. So what is a sandbox and what is a railroad game? Well, the railroad games will be any of the campaign games. I'm trying to look if I've got one lying around, and I do not, because I guess they're just not my style. But any of the big campaigns that you might find, if it's Curse of Strahd for D&D, or Jewel of Yavin for Star Wars, which is one of my preferred settings, all of that stuff is available, and you can read an extensive book and work your way through it and hopefully lead the players through. What's interesting about that is I've read some comments on the internet when I was doing a bit of research for this, where people have said that the publishers know full well that people buy the books mostly to read them. Seldom do people run the stories as written, because railroaded stories can be very hard to follow. Players might stray. If they don't stray, which might be rare after all, because players are players, then the game master is left with a lot of questions and problems that they have to solve on the fly, and that can be quite unsettling and difficult. So you do see stories, where a lot of the campaign is written as a very beautiful book with lots of fascinating story elements to work with, but doesn't actually help the game master because it's too controlled. The other option, of course, is to build what people like to call a sandbox, and typically the videos on this are all about D&D, and they almost always describe setting up a village, and from the village are a number of quests the players can go on. And then I've seen literally the advice of essentially take a small railroad module, clip it onto your village, take several of these, and just attach them to the village via some quest hook giving NPC. And I can't help but think that if I wanted to play World of Warcraft, I would just go play World of Warcraft. And that's what those stories, although that advice often feels like to me. And again, I find the advice here can be pretty unsatisfying. The true sandbox a lot of people reflect on is that original kind of D&D style, that old school style of dungeon bashing your way with a series of quite hard problems that the players can choose to overcome or not. And the world is sort of unforgiving or uninterested in the player. Perhaps an example of this would be a West Marches style game or a hex crawl game. Well, actually less so West Marches, more of a hex crawl style game. Very open-ended. Isle of Dread, I saw Isles of Dread was an example of a campaign that you could consider a bit of a sandbox. There's a setting, the players are there to explore the setting and to interact with elements in it. But I find those again leave me unsatisfied. They're unsatisfying as a railroad game, because in the railroad game you are merely responding to the quest as directed against plot beats that are directed by the book, and very much you are part of a plot, just like if you're watching a TV series. And in a sandbox game, they're often described in ways that make them sound either quite flat, or entirely the job of the players to make anything of. So what I want to talk about, after I've been rambling on for this little while, is what I will call a Spiderweb game. And a Spiderweb, I call it that because I've not really seen any good names for this style. I know there are probably some out there. Some might even say it's a sandbox game, but it feels different to me. And I want to talk about how you build a game world with interesting events and a reaction and responsiveness to the player, but it still is rich, it's deep, it has it brings the players into a place that they feel like they're up to interesting activities, they're getting involved in stuff, and the stuff is going to respond to them in a way that feels natural. So this is how I built my Star Wars world. I hope the players are enjoying it. They keep turning up, so I'm assuming they do, and I will talk you through it. So the way I do it is, first of all, you need to come up with, that's incredibly white background. You need to come up with an overall theme, right? So I think a couple of keywords is a good example for a theme. If you're out there listening, you're welcome to just text away. So one of my players, I asked some people to come up with some ideas for themes, and one of them came up with an industrial revolution. And I'm going to say it's a fantasy industrial revolution. And the theme is going to be, we're going to make it, I'm going to say, Oliver Twist. Twist plus steam. And magic. So you think it's Oliver Twist, which is kind of funny because that's the common background that my players currently share in Star Wars. It's an Oliver Twist theme. They're all orphans. They were in an orphan crime gang. So it's kind of grim. It's kind of, do I remember how to push that? Yeah. It's kind of grim. I know it's a bit played out. It's class-based. It's poverty. And we'll throw magic in there. Maybe the magic is replaced steam, we're going to say. I really like, and I haven't seen anyone really do this, I have an idea for a fantasy setting where essentially magic is, I'm just going to cross steam out. No steam, magic is harnessed to do work. Not something I've seen a lot of people write on. I think it's a really interesting idea. So we got this cool setting, and maybe we'll even have in there races, as in elves, dwarves, something like that. Maybe fairies. Maybe we'll make it a bit Victorian fantasy, right? There could be fae, and there could be gremlins. I'm going to say, I don't want to get too Harry Potter, goblins or something. So I'll just say gremlins, and who knows what else. So we've got this cute system, or this cute setting. Kind of want to run a Genesis game in this now. What are we going to do from this? There's two ways, I guess, you build this, right? Hey there, Sporia. Just passing through. Nice to see me around. Hey, good one. And hello, Ethan, as well. Great to have you here. What are we going to do with this? In a railroaded session, in a railroaded story, what you're going to do, perhaps, is come up with, like, your big, bad, evil guy or girl. That's meant to be a B. And that person is going to, rule the world. And they have a plot. And they're going to do a bunch of things. And you're going to, throw the PCs. That's meant to be an arrow. You're going to throw the PCs into that plot. And they're going to go A to B to C to D to big fight. And you might have some characterful settings along the way, but really what we're talking about here is a pretty standard story, right? Think of any major fantasy simple story out there, Kroll or Conan or something, right? This is the kind of story. The problem I have with this is that to me it doesn't really give the players, I mean, for a start, I think it's kind of boring to run. It gives there's a lot of time with the GM sort of waiting for things to happen or trying to set up some story element and get the players through it, which is dry. The next thing you could do, obviously, is have a sandbox. So, you got your sandbox style, and you might be sitting in ye olde, you got London. We'll go with London, fantasy London, and our setting here. Maybe there's a pub. Of course there is. And then you're going to just go off and do some quest, and then come back, and go off and do some quest, and then come back. This is, I think, kind of like a giant fairground ride, to be honest. Like, you might as well be in Disney, right? There's quests coming and going. Everyone is waiting for the player to do a thing, and then they respond to the player doing a thing, and then off you go again. Kind of dry, I think. Anyway, I think it just feels like World of Warcraft, or you're going to Disneyland. So let's get rid of that. Here's what I'm going to propose we do. What we're going to do is we're going to create, right at the start of this story, and this is the nice thing, I think this is a not low effort, but you don't have to spell everything out. We're going to treat our setting like a movie scene. So if you think of any big complex movie, let's even think of something like Oliver Twist, since we're on that topic. What have you got? It's been so long in the past now, I can barely remember all the details. You've got a gang, you've then got an orphanage, you have a nice old man, you have Bill Sykes and his girlfriend, his horribly oppressed girlfriend, and you have this setting, which is always just a phenomenal part, right? This twisted, dark, muddy, sick London under grimy clouds. So that's cool. You don't have to know everything about London to have this be a really interesting and engaging story. So let's start with our little twist on the this industrial revolution. What I want us to do essentially is to come up with 3 factions. We're going to start with 3 major factions. And so my colleague, or my player, Sean, he suggested, first of all, one big faction, Federation of Workers. So the Federation of Workers, I'm going to say they're kind of almost like a proto socialist, because socialism founded in the UK, of course. Marx got a lot of his ideas seeing how terrible the Industrial Revolution was for the average Brit. So there you go. There's my sickle and my terrible hammer. So Federation of Workers, great. We're in an interesting. We got this faction, cool. And what we're going to do is put a little circle around it. This is kind of how I do things. Then we've got the Belgravia Supper Club, the Belgravia Supper Club, and this is Toffs, right? We're just going to keep it simple. There's a nice little top hat. Looks very cool. Yes, so these are a major faction of the industrialists, we'll say. Okay, and this industrialist faction probably going to be pretty opposed to this other faction. We're not going to make any massive presumptions straight away. And then we have another interesting group out there, is the Gravener Society. Gravina Society, which Sean suggests are a group of academics. So we're going to have our little test tube. That is meant to be a test tube. So I've got a test tube there, and a test tube stand, and I don't know what else to say about that. So the Gravener Society, they, I think we can say, are a major learned organization, and they are for social progress. And then because we're kind of, I'm going to throw one more in here, because we're kind of a fantasy magic, I'm going to say the archetype. I don't know why, that's kind of a weird name. And these are a class of kind of mage technician rulers. No one calls themselves mages, they are artificers or something, right? So we have the archetype. Now what we've got to do, and it's kind of obvious, I would have thought, is connect our I'll just go back to the chat, what is this game? This is no game. I'm making up, sorry Ethan, I'm doing a tabletop role-playing game kind of discussion. How you build an interesting setting, and to do so without relying on Sandbox and Railroad. So how do we connect these things together? Well, I think we need to connect how they relate to each other. So the first thing is, I think we can say that the Federation of Workers and the Supper Club, they don't like each other, right? Got a red line. They don't like each other. These are workers, these are industrialists, the people who run the factories. They're not a big fans. These guys here are naturally, you would sort of friendly, I would say, and they are naturally somewhat, they're somewhat probably going to be opposed to the Federation of Workers. The Gravina Society is probably going to be the most complex one. They have a bunch of potentially neutral or even supporting the workers, because a lot of them are kind of, I don't know, you could say like they're like bourgeois. They're rich enough to think about the world and realize the poor are oppressed, so they want to help themselves. Some of the young ones even go off to join the like the Moulin Rouge. They go off to join the arts and the poor because they see value in the poor. They see the poor as being virtuous, right? They have, in their older community, they are friendly. The older crowd, the old scientists, think of the Royal Society. They're pretty friendly with the Supper Club because that's where they need the money from, right? So this is the money. We could say this is the ideas. This is where they get all their inspiration. Whoa, that's gone a bit wrong. Go away thing. So yeah, they get their eyes. The young ones are getting their inspiration from the struggles of the workers and the poor. But the old ones know that if they want to go on expeditions to the sunken planets or the sunken world or the underworld or what have you, they need money. These guys, it's just all hate all the time because they want to overthrow. These guys broadly hate, and these guys here, you've got this kind of respect thing going on because they need to work together. So we've got the start of a setting. What we have to do now, this is very simple. Like, you can start throwing in more. What we have to do now is tie the players to one of these groups. Like, you have to tie them, I think, to a faction. You have to give them a reason to be interested in one of these communities, right? And so let's say we want to be extra interesting, and we're gonna stick the players. They're all poor, they've all come up through poverty in some fashion. Are they hero revolutionaries? Maybe not. Maybe they are. To give them maybe the poor thing would limit them a bit too much. Like in my Star Wars one, they are tied today. They're kind of roguish adventurers. Could we have them as Gravener Society, young and up and coming? That kind of sounds fun. They are explorers and adventurers, because this fantasy world we're creating, this sort of magical industrial revolution world, it has a lot of unexplored tracks. Maybe there's been some kind of conjugation of the spheres 100 years ago, a little bit like The Witcher, right? And magic is now out there in the world, and that's how we've harnessed, the world has harnessed these magical powers or magical rocks or energies or what have you to accelerate it to the Industrial Revolution. So people are still figuring out how all this works. So we've got our players. They're part of the Gravina Society. That lets them be maybe some well enough to do and to have a point of contact to do stuff. When you anchor them to a group, you can then, I'm going to make this, I'm going to put a little red line here as well, because some people, on both sides may not like each other depending on who they are. When you anchor them to a group in a community, you now have a way of tying them to caring about the events in the world. So in this case, I'm just going to say they are in the Gravener Society and they are employed as they're either scientists or help. So the help, like the muscle to help on these explorations, may come from these backgrounds, or there may be a rich dilettante from the Supper Club type class, the upper class, who has come down because he wants to go on adventures with the Gravener Society, And so you might have a little party of quite interesting characters. In my Star Wars game, in my Star Wars role-playing game, the players were all, except for the robot, were all members of a street gang at Queen Station. And on Queen Station, they were led by a man called, they call Father. And he was, where is he? I found a cool picture on the internet. Well done, that artist. It's really neat. Unfortunately, you don't have your signature on there. But Father kind of looked after the players as orphans and got them into petty crime, which is kind of, funny. It's a little bit of the Oliver Twist thing, right? So they were in petty crime, and and Father was kind of tied to a hut figure. And all the players, as they grew up and had various other small adventures between the start of the game, basically the gang got broken up when there was a terrible bomb, and good point. Good point, Ethan. So there was a terrible... You tell me, what do you think the connection is between Gravener and Archetype? I'm curious. I think it would be neutral, if not opposing, for reasons. They could be very conservative. So, they were tied. They're tied, very tightly bound, obligated under the Star Wars system to a hut, who pretty much runs their lives. And this is a great source of tension. Now, so Gravener Society, that's a great point. Gravener Society, I think, has a great deal of tension with the Archetype, because the Archetype is a conservative. You could say, let's say they're like a deeply conservative movement. So maybe magic is a little bit older than a couple of 100 years. They're a deeply conservative movement, whereas the Gravener Society wants to push science, technology, and what have you. Maybe the actual kind of magic industrial revolution we're seeing is not what these guys have come from. The Archetype have come from a more traditional alchemical magic, and so, which is a very personal scale. So having entire factories run on magic, where the average person can interact with magical devices, is very odd, and that's what the Gravener Society is driven. So now we have this interesting little community here, right? So how do we then turn that into a plot, into something that's going to drive things forward? What I think we can say is this system should be, at the start of the game, a relatively steady state. Okay, so there'll be stories in history. So maybe there's been some protests, there's been riots, there's been strikes. I mean, just go look at the history of the Industrial Revolution. There may even be, I'm going to change colors to this is going to be like for other factions. There's been like a Millerite faction over here, we're going to say. Now, if you don't know who they were, from memories, if I'm spelling this, the Millerites were anti-factory and anti-industrial revolution. They tried to burn down factories and destroy the mills and all this stuff. So kind of a poor group, but they were actually trying to return to an agrarian ideal. Okay, now you got an interesting opportunity here, and I'm going to draw the dotted line and see if you can follow where I'm going. It's going to go all over here. Now that's interesting. The Archetype, they might be kind of in favor of this group, because this group absolutely hate this group. And almost certainly they may actually secretly quite like the tradition of having class and lord and all that stuff. So got the Millerites. That's interesting. I like that. So we have the players tied into this world. What's going to happen? We need to choose one of these groups to be the active interactor, because right now everything is pretty static. We've got these guys want global socialist revolution. They're pretty much, and in the same way that the Industrial Revolution saw lots of action in that space. These guys want to end factories. These guys want to explore the wealth of weird magic stuff that is now out there. And these guys want stability, money, and they're broadly conservative, but in a kind of neoliberal industrial fashion. These guys want to stay in power and are nervous about all the change. So which one are we going to choose to act? What I'm going to say is that within the Millerites, let's say, there is a leader. Is it going to be the Millerites? No, actually, I think it's going to be within the Archetype. Someone with power. Within the Archetype is a leader. And We'll leave that highlight off. And this leader, this leader is a person who wants to see things resolved, and basically is a baddie, right? So the baddie here wants to see things resolved, and they may know enough of the traditional alchemical magic to pull off a plot, and we need to think of a end goal they're going to hit. They want to maybe discredit the Gravener Society in total, you could say. That makes it a bit too easy to for the players to decide which side they're on. And there's some interesting things you can do, I think, when you build games like this, where you decide the good, the bad isn't obvious. So we have, we need a plot. If there's anyone out there who's watching, you're welcome to. There's only one person, it's pretty small. We should be able to come up with some plot. I'm going to say that they're hunting for knowledge, and they're going to break magic. Essentially, break modern magic. So that is the big bad plot, and it would end the Industrial Revolution. It would mess up quite a lot of things, and the way they're going to do that is, and I think you need to come up with like 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 major kind of beats to the story, right? Like not story, but major steps. So the first step is they, because of their background, they know some, I don't know if you call it, maybe dark magic. It feels a little bit too cliched fantasy, right? But they've got some, just make this crown pretty. They've got some knowledge that they think they can go and find. So they have the start of this idea, and they want to go and explore. So the first thing is maybe to, just getting down to the bottom of my plan. They want to explore ruins. There's either some knowledge in ruins, or when the spheres collided, if we steal the Witcher idea, there are locations of power where they think they can contact either, let's say, Cthulhu-like. I'm going to add in some outer gods here just because I've always liked that Cthulhu aesthetic. We're not going to make them the core feature of the game. They're uninterested in the world. But they're going to explore, find, build. They're going to find some stuff. They're going to build whatever it... That looks terrible. Explore, find, build. Maybe we'll just get rid of that one. We'll just go... There we go. Build, find, explore, deploy, or use. And what the thing is that they end up using will end all these modern machines. It'll ruin the magical rocks that everyone uses to power the industry. Cool. So now what we have is this kind of fraught, tense, and it should be tense. There should be things that you've written down, that ideas within your world that are keeping these factions kind of at each other's throat. In my world for Star Wars, essentially the players work for some huts. That hut family has issues with other hut families. They've picked up something weird that the Imperials are doing. They don't really trust them, obviously. And they also are involved. There seems to be some corporate warfare going on that they may or may not be involved in. I don't want to spoil it in case my players are listening. And there's also just odd things the players have run into, and they don't really know why. They know that it's part of the story, but things are going in odd ways. Things keep happening that are odd. They got involved accidentally in some piracy and pirated all this, accidentally realized they were pirated some covert Imperial research team. It was very odd. So all kinds of weird things are happening for them. So now you got this. One of the fun things I think you could do at this point is to start thinking about the factions within these groups. Okay, so we're going to just say this is the plan, and we need to think about how they intend to kind of do that. Like, their plan should be something that they could actually say right at the start of the story, this is my plan. I reckon I need to find A, B, C, D, and I'm going to figure out as we go what's involved with that. So now you need to tie the players to these events. And what you do is like a spiderweb. As the players interact with elements in the world, the rest of the world is going to respond. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that the players decide are working for the Gravener Society. So obviously they could be tasked with the exploration job. So they've been they're kind of contracted to go out and support some discovery. And they don't really know what's involved. They just know that the boss, one of their bosses at the Gravina Society, and this is where you can start getting into your NPCs, one of the bosses at Gravina Society has been asked by a senior person in the archetype to arrange an exploration project and to write a detailed report at the end of it. I think in this, you need NPCs with lots of minions. We need NPCs with minions, people that they're going to tell what to do, ways that they're not going to always be involved directly, right? So now you've got players, so you've got them. What does that even do? What do we have to do to make a new? Nope, I'm trying to think of making a new one without wiping everything, maybe. So we have now got a situation where the players are going to first series of quests, they're off to explore, do some stuff within the world, some kind of go into some ruins or explore some cave system that leads some magical stuff, and what they're looking for is going to be like some very specific kind of tomes or some carvings in stone. It's going to be a little unusual. They're going to learn some stuff. Maybe they're going to pick up some bits and bobs along the way. You should have them get to know at least one or two NPCs from other areas. And this is what's great. You don't have to spec out a lot of stuff. Maybe they end up having to bump into Federation of Workers because some NPC here, because the connection to this cave system is deep in the through the sewers of some industrial Manchester, some kind of industrial revolution factory district, right? And so they get a little caught up. They can't go into this exploration without working with some union leader who turns out to be involved with this semi-revolutionary group, the Federation of Workers. So they have to do some favors. And you can layer these favors on, right? Kind of quest-like in RPGs. So they've got some familiarity here. Along the way, they may find out that, or they may get involved with the supper club or some people in here because one of them may be connected to the supper club, and or then someone from the supper club has heard about this quest or this job, and has some other reason and asks for them to perhaps maybe report on, because they know the area, to report on the Federation of Workers. So they're like, oh yeah, by the way, we'll pay you an extra $500 if you can also let us know about the community there, because we can't really get in there. And when you start building this, I think you need to come up with a couple of major NPCs for each major faction. You need to name them, and you need to come up with a good trait for them, like gregarious, intelligent, witty, and then you need to come up with maybe a bad trait. This could also just be, the good trait could just be shy. Subscriber, to give you the game master something to hang off, and it could be jealous, greedy, something which is kind of a weakness that you might want to go, oh yeah, that person is that way. They would definitely do the bad thing, right? So you have a couple of NPCs that they should know by name from each major faction, and this one they might even know the big bad by name, but they would definitely know the leaders by name, even if they don't work with them directly. And we're going to throw in other factions that exist here. So you've got the cops, we'll say. I'm just going to pretend, and it could be some other things out there. The supper club might have different factions as well. It might have the bankers, the industrialists, and the gentry. I'm going to say the landed gentry. And these are all potentially factions. This is getting a bit messy. that may also somewhat oppose each other. And you should come up with one NPC to represent each one of them and think about, what do they think about what is going to happen? How are they going to respond? And this is what I like to do. I almost have a little chart which says for each faction, what do they think of what's going on right now? So if they were to know of the full plan, here's Mr. Big Bad. He's got spiky green hair. He wants to find the knowledge to break the modern magic by exploring some ruins and finding the tech and building it and using it. What would each group think of that? So the Gravena Society would be very unhappy if that was to happen, because that would throw everything back to a kind of almost pre-industrial stage. The gentry in the supper club would actually be probably happy, because landed gentry in the Industrial Revolution, if you've watched any period drama, you'll know they suffered because the loss of serfs off the land, really. The bankers would be, we could say, neutral. The industrialists would actually be very unhappy. Interestingly, the Millerites would be happy. The workers, that's an interesting one. I don't know which way they would lean. Some would be happy. I would say probably unhappy, but you could have factions within the workers as well. Not only the Millerites, but those who believe in revolution. They might see it as a chance for, actually, the instability would be awesome. But the reformers, they would be unhappy. So now, that's a massive score. So now you can start to get a feel, I think, for how things are going to play out. And what you want to do is decide, how do these lot know each other? So I've drawn this green dotted line because I think maybe our big bad, maybe he's the head of the intelligence network. He actually runs or is tightly involved in the Millerites, these anti-industrial revolutionaries, right? And he actually directs them. So often they're out there. Oh, and I would say, they Millerites hate the supper club, the industrialists, and vice versa. So he's using the Millerites as a foil against the supper club. Often, if he thinks the supper club are getting too much power, these guys go and burn down a factory, which pisses these guys off as well, but they're working class, so it's kind of tense there as well. Lots of tension, right? Figure out how these groups hate each other. All of them kind of love each other a bit to varying degrees. So now you've got a setting which I think really suits itself to a kind of a spider web of play. So the players are out there, and they are one of the top teams in the Gravener Society Exploration Division. That's right, we can have different divisions in here too. Exploration, I'll just make it exploration. We've got R&D, and we've got the wannabes. Those are the toffs who aren't smart enough to actually cut it, but they've got money, so they get invited to all the meetings because they're going to pay for everything, right? Yoink, that is disgusting. I'm going to wipe that all away because that's impossible to read. So they're off doing this quest. So the first thing they do is they find out stuff for the Gravener Society, and they report that back. Yay, that's all well and good. They've met this couple of people in this community, and they've got to know them. The revolutionaries have had to deal with them. That's kind of cool. And maybe they essentially have a job for hire. They're kind of job for hire people, maybe they're private investigators or private facilitators of adventure for the Gravener Society. And so maybe they actually get contacted by these guys because they want to find out what's going on with this group. We can't work with these Millerites. Like, they're not very good. And that might be from the reform arm of the Federation of Workers. So they're doing a couple of jobs for them. And this is where you can, I don't know, any kind of interesting bits and bobs jobs that could be relevant. Infiltration, getting to know them, joining these guys on a raid, doing some detective work. No, Factorio, no Alfito. I am doing a whole ramble about role-playing games because I can. So now that's great. They've done that. In the process, they may need to help raise money for the Gravener Society by doing a job for one of these bankers, or maybe one of these toffs. You know, there's that whole young toff, and this young toff wants to be led off on some kind of quest. He wants to go visit the Fae, which is super secret, so our explorer friends are going to take them. In the process, this plot keeps moving. So they are just one of many exploration teams, it turns out. They're going to find that out. So we know that's going to happen. Yeah, they're probably going to find that out. And we know that. Who else is going to find it out? We're going to say Federational workers are going to find it out, because people hire these workers and don't even think a second thought about them, but they talk to each other. There's been all this weird exploration and all this money being flashed around. That's very odd. These guys are going to find out because they're connected to archetype and what have you, right? And maybe bankers, industrialists are just going to hear about it through their own little spy networks. And so eventually the bad guy is going to find a MacGuffin, or maybe a series of MacGuffins or information, and I think the players should be heavily involved in that. Now, am I making a game? Yeah, I'm just sort of explaining a setting, how you might build a setting without worrying about sandbox or railroading, but making it really tight and coherent and really taut, so that the players, when they move in that setting, the world changes and moves in interesting ways around them, and they get to make a lot of interesting decisions without it being overworked. Like if you were to just design a massive playbook and for every faction and every NPC, like treating it like I don't know, I'm just calling it a Spiderweb style of storytelling. I'm not sure if that's a good name or not, but I just found there's too many sandbox videos out there on role-playing games, and all they do is they tell you to set up a village and then attach a bunch of quests to it, and that's kind of it. That's your sandbox. And a lot of times, and players sit there and go, well, what do I do? And I think that's, and then everyone's like, ho ho ho, isn't that funny? And that's why sandboxes are hard, or that's why people don't like them. And I'm like, well, no, I just think that's kind of a rubbish way people have done it. So we're going to do another setting in a second. If you have a setting and you want to throw one out there, or some factions, help me build it as I talk. That's awesome. So there's going to be some major significant stuff that this guy needs to find, and then he needs to build. And along the way, people are going to find out. And as they find out, they're going to ask the players to do stuff for them, or the players may get interested and want to go find out themselves. So as building goes on, the industrialists are going to be like, well, we're getting all this demand for weird machines that are being sent to let's say the Orkney Islands. We're going to have this fantasy England. There's this weird, why are they all going up to Orkney Islands? Hey, Gravener Society, can you find out what's going up in Orkney Islands? Send our boys up. They realize there's like an archetype run. Maybe the cops are trying to prevent them. There's a whole subterfuge thing. Lots of running and chases. As they get chased, they don't know why, because actually the senior figure in the archetype is behind it all, and he's found out, that this group are after him, but he doesn't really think much of them yet, so he's not that worried. But stuff's happening. But these guys know, hey, Federation of workers, like, there's something really weird going on. We have these friends who are explorers. Let's ask them to go and chase our leads down. And along the way, the players are slowly figuring out what's happening. But these groups, and then they're going to do their own thing to interact. So in my Star Wars game, and I haven't even, I'm not even going to be able to put any thought into how these groups would interact now, because I would want to play the stories through, and then at the end of each session or between sessions, as major plot beats happen, I'd be thinking, what is the named NPC going to do here? Like, I'm going to name 3 NPCs here that are representative of the toffs, the money crowd, the old R&D researchers, and the young up and comers. How do they feel about what's just happened? What are they going to do? So what resources do they have? What would they ask the players to do? Would they tell the players anything? How would the players maybe get screwed over in the process and then have to fall back? Maybe they get booted out of the Gravener Society because they're raising too many questions. And the archetype is leaning on the bankers here to get the Graveners. They're going to withhold money unless they boot these players out. So the players are now lost. Maybe they end up having to shift ship and head over and become revolutionaries, or maybe not. Maybe they hate them. Maybe they've gone full Millerite. That would be unusual. Revolutionary, throw away the technology. And what you do is, and maybe an industrialist here. Maybe there's a named industrialist, and this person's a real forward-leaning. I'm thinking what's his name? Who built the world's largest ship? Gosh. Englishman, never quite launched. Anyway, built some famous bridges and ships. Classic guy, had a massive top hat. Maybe he's actually like this. I'm going to do this enormous top hat. Maybe he's managed to befriend the players through one of these quests, and he's like, I've got some real concerns. You need to help me investigate these people. And along the way, you can see how each of the factions is going to start doing stuff. These guys are worried. They're like, heck, there's something weird going on. We can take advantage of this. Let's burn down more factories. That's what the revolutionaries are doing. The reformers are like, no, we need reform of the social welfare system. Maybe they have allies in here, and it turns out these guys are working together to reform the system. This person in the archetype hates this person and actually thinks that this person is bad. And what you can see is that as the players move through quests, and in the questing, the actual stories they complete, they're almost irrelevant to figure out, even right up to the session, I would say, because the players are kind of hooked. You start them obligated with this. They're obligated at the start to the Gravener Society. As they do things, they're going to annoy people. They're going to upset other factions, and other factions are going to let them know. They're going to get into fights. There's a whole... We haven't talked about what these races and species and this weird other realm think about all of this. But each of them is going to see this plot start to unfold, and then what happens if the guy gets the thing and the players don't either decide to choose a side or don't work to stop them. So in my Star Wars story, if you're one of my players, stop listening right now or I will slap you. Go walk away for 2 minutes. It's possible the big bad has a plan the players like, which is very funny, and the players may actually want to see that plan happen. It's not necessarily an evil plan, but it's a big political shift plan for the setting they're in. And they may be like, this guy's bad and all of his people are bad and we've fought with them, but actually we like this plan, which is kind of funny because it might put them on the other side from the rebellion, who might not like that plan. I haven't quite decided that. And there are different factions. There are other factions that they're working with. Some of them who will like the plan and some of them who will not like the plan. And I think it gives the players heaps of agency because they're living inside a breathing world. This is how I like to do stories. I think it's a really fun way of doing it. And it's not a vast amount of work. You need to come up with factions. Some factions within those factions, and then a few NPCs. And then for these major NPCs, this person might have several assistants, which I might name, and other individuals, because I might say they may have their own agendas, right? They may want to overthrow someone, or they may agree with the friendly revolutionary or reformer, but actually be working for, the Millerites. And so you can kind of easily just add almost like a fractal. You can look at a group and then add a couple of people, give them a good and a bad trait and a couple of qualities, describe them and see what happens. And the nice thing is the players will meet NPCs through the work. So for example, my players right now are at this pirate base, and this is Foundry, which is an online role-playing platform. They're at this Horizon's Edge. They're in the Event Horizon bar. And Malaya Dees, she's a pirate queen. So yeah, pirates, I like them. So she's a pirate queen. They've been tasked to go and rescue someone in her prison. She's actually kind of came up a few stories ago with the players, and they didn't know she was a bad pirate queen. They had a big suspicion because I had this huge entrance. That was quite amusing to me. And there's a bunch of threads that come together at this setting. And but I didn't know she was going to be the pirate queen until the day before the setting. She was kind of a fun NPC in a previous story, and then I decided, what? She has the wherewithal to be the pirate queen unknown to the players, and that would explain why the players ended up accidentally messing up her operation, and they got involved in some piracy by accident. It got in her way, and she's got pretty mad at them, but she's also pretty entertained by the players. So there's Dash. He's I don't know why he's hiding behind that token. So yes, that's how the players ended up meeting this person. But this NPC evolved as part of the story. I gave her a side she's on, a group she's with, and then whammo, over it was to joining a faction and thinking about her relation to the story. Yeah, if there's anyone listening who has any questions, that'd be cool. But how can I wipe everything? I actually quite like the setting now. It's always a problem, right? There must be a way. Boop. Boop. Alright, cool. I might do one more for anyone's interested. One of my players suggested sort of Wild West cowboy setting. Where is my controls? There we go. So he suggested like a cowboy setting, a Weird West, right? And I would love if anyone's watching, chuck your ideas at this, right? So Weird West, and you're welcome to chuck in some factions. So there was a few factions. So the Undead. And I'm sorry, we're going to make it really, I guess, it's going to be cowboys and Indians, to use that terrible phrase, but hopefully with a bit more subtlety and gentleness than the old movies or the old stories would apply. Let me write properly. We have the Undead. And one of the players had quite a nice idea, which was that there are the Death Dealers. So the Death Dealers are an organization of blind old men devoted to keeping the dead buried. Are they like ninjas? Are they cowboy? Are they ninjas? Are we talking like Blind Fury or whatever the name of that movie is? I don't know. Cowboy ninjas, we're going to say. So we've got the Undead. We got bandits, including, I'm going to do a little underline, the Tumbleweed Boys, which are super lazy bandits. And we have Native Americans, we could say, including the Deep River Tribe, and which are known for their elite canoe tomahawk throwers. We're from New Zealand. We don't know. I'm sorry, we don't know Indian Native American culture very well. And maybe we're going to have like settlers in our Weird West setting, right? And there's going to be town farm types. And what else could there be? Something fun out there. I'm having a look at what everyone else has written on my list. Frontiersmen. Town, farm, frontier. And we'll put mine on there as well. You always got to have miners, haven't you? Frontiersmen, we'll say. Frontiers peoples. Okay, so we have bandits. We have Native American types in this Weird West thing. And it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be a bit pulpy. It's going to be a bit cowboy and Indian. Well, that's kind of obvious, but we're going to say it's pulpy and it's going to be weird. So we've got Undead. I think we could also have what else are we going to have? Like monsters. I'll just put monsters down here, which are just going to be this unaligned faction. So now again, we're just going to do this one quite quickly. The bandits are obviously don't like the settlers. No one likes the undead. Oh, actually, I think we can have one more faction. Let's have like again, like the railroad. The railroad is coming through, and that's got people with money behind it. In this setting, where the railroads are maybe bad, so these people don't like them. No one should like that. The there's definitely hatred here. There might be reasons why these people are these tribes are kind of neutral, like there's some long tradition, some long cultural traditions where it's not necessarily bad. The railroad definitely don't like the undead. What is this line? This is a meaningless line. Let's fix. No. Make this line better. So, bandits like this. Badness all around. No one likes any of this stuff. These guys don't like them. Does anyone like each other at all in this world? I say that's kind of a neutral relationship. That's most of the connections. And what we can think about is, again, an active participant in this. So it's going to be pretty straightforward. I think the actor in this is the railroad, right? And the railroad wants to blow up stuff. We're going to cut a path through these communities, and to do so, maybe one of the bad guys is in here, and he's going to get the monsters to rise up. There's a rising up arrow. So the monsters, which are kind of passively held in place by, we're just making this stuff up, monsters passively held in place by the ancient rituals of the peoples here, with their special totems and what have you, and the undead, which are also kind of held in place. Maybe these guys are kind of friendly in some way, by these long traditions which no one really understands, and the settlers keep disturbing, and the bandits just take advantage of. So their plan is so the railroad's going to mess everything up, get these monsters to rise up. That will cause everyone who kind of knows that the native peoples are keeping the monsters down or under control. They're going to blame these guys. They're going to be like, you didn't do your job and kept the monsters down. We don't like you, and now we definitely don't like you. But actually, it's the railroaders who are causing it. They have maybe bought off some bandits to help with this problem, and they want to move the settlers on. These guys, I almost wonder if they're like, maybe they're a secret faction. Maybe there's some secret ninja death dealer faction out there. Who knows? So I don't even know quite where they fit in. I'm going to put this here, but we're going to say that the local people, they know all about them. They know about the secret death dealers and the blind ninjas who keep the undead down. Kind of because, these two are obviously related. So it looks nasty. Just do this. Bleep. So we have a bad dude. He's got a top hat as well. It's always rich top hat people, isn't it? He's a bad dude. He's got this plot. The railroad and the money behind it are going to knock down they're going to tee off all these people. Some of these people might be in favor. Town might be like, yes, we want it. The farmers might be like, yes, we love this. These guys is going to be people in here who are friendly with some of these various groups, and there might be 2, 3, several different tribal groups, different kinds of factions. The miners, they might be against the plot. These guys are definitely against the plot. These guys don't like the plot. These guys are monsters. They don't care. Who knows? Definitely big do not like. These guys, if they actually knew the plot, might be against it, because the railroad brings more people, more civilization, less chance to escape the law, especially if there's several different bandit groups, right? So this is one where you could go interesting ways. So the first thing you could do is you could have the players as a bandit group, their own little bandits. For some reason, it could be a post. Is it like a lot of the best cowboy films? Is it post Civil War? Or during? What if it's during a civil war of some kind? And so during Civil War, he actually has taken a lot of money to make this railroad happen because it's important for the war effort, whichever side that is. So the bandits are, so the players, here's our friendly trusty players. They are, I don't know why one of them is weird and short. Maybe he's a dwarf. We are Weird West. They are former soldiers. They're either escaped, they're probably all like escapees. So they've been banditing. Do they have principles? Maybe they do. It's a bit of a Star Wars theme here. You could easily just convert any of this into Star Wars or any other setting just about. They have principles. They are hearts of gold bandits. So they only prey on... maybe they hunt monsters. Maybe they're monster hunting bandits. Or maybe they go after the rich folks in town only, and they leave the other... Maybe they do a bit of mining interdiction. They go after the railroad, absolutely. So they're going to get pulled in because maybe they're one of the groups that gets hired to do some jobs, and it turns out those jobs are related to raising the monsters up or to annoying these particular groups. And so in this fashion, you can see how, again, there's enough here. Once you throw a few NPCs behind each major faction and people and scenes and settings, I like to, in my Star Wars game, I have multiple sort of scenes which these beautiful artists have made, artist concepts, and I each one of them is I build as I need, but I know who they belong to. I know what, it's going to put a placeholder out here really, but I know what the players which group these areas belong to, who they're involved with when they go there, what can they expect from these locations, and but all of that really gets driven on the fly because I know fundamentally the major groups, factions, and communities that exist within the world. So this Weird West setting, it's kind of quite fun as well. You can see yourself putting together a whole bunch of stories around these guys here, your players. They find the monster hunting is going a bit weird, like the monsters are either not there or something starts to change as this guy's plot unfolds. And again, give yourself 3 or 4 or 5 major plot beats that he needs to do to achieve his goals. And it might be the monsters are just one part of it, like maybe this is step 3 and he's also got a whole, he wants to push the native peoples off the land. Ooh, that's pretty nasty. How is he going to do that? Maybe he's actually going to rile the town up. Maybe he's got some people in town. He can get a mob or a posse together, or maybe he's going to bring in the army. Maybe the army is at his beck and call. They're going to in-fly the army. They're going to try and... It's a bit grim, isn't it? It's definitely grim. They're going to push the local people off the land. Maybe by this point, the players have actually got some kind of Dances with Wolves relationship with these people, because to be a good monster hunter and harvest those special monster resources, you need to learn some of the local ways. Maybe you've got someone here, and draw a mohawk on this chap, and he's an escaped soldier who was a member of one of these tribes, you could say. And I think if you ask players to play in a setting like this, you need to give them quite a tight grip on where their background is going to be. You don't have to ask them to spec everything out in a multi-page document, but you need to say, say if it was a story, you're going to be bandits. You're going to be bandits. You're on the fringes of society. You could be someone who's like a native people who have maybe their local family, their local tribal group. In New Zealand, you could talk about a hapu. If you're talking Māori people, that would be like a family compared to your iwi, which is your whole tribe. So maybe a hapu, you could say, got destroyed. You're the last surviving member and you've had to go be a bandit now. There's no other options. You're not welcome in town, so you're a bandit. And you've caught up with these other individuals, and you're all either either bandits, but you've fallen out of the bandit group, or you are deserters from the military, from the middle of the Civil War. So you can come up with it, give them a relatively tight background, let them come up with the ideas, and that will tie them to the setting. Being tied to the setting, I think, is vital if you run a story like this. They have to feel obligated and connected to everyone else. My poor players get pushed left and right by the huts. They have another patron now who's been very helpful to them, but he also kind of has them by the short and curlies. And at the top of the screen, as you'll have seen in Foundry, if I pull it up again, I've got a plugin called Party Resources, and it has a constant reminder of how much money they need to give to add to the hut, because every time they do a job, he's demanded a cut. So they have quite extensive conversations about how much they're going to tell Add to the Hut, who's pretty powerful, about what they're doing, and how much they're going to confess the money should be handed over to them. They've been pretty honest so far, because they're not stupid. But again, they've got a new secret patron that Adot doesn't know about, and it's all very interesting. So you can have all these kind of interesting little interactions now. They can meet a lot of these factions. They can do jobs for them. They can uncover the plot and start hearing about the plot. And when I mean the plot, I don't think you should come up with an extensive plan as to what the story is. What you should do, though, is have what is the ideas that are coming out of this chap's head? Like, what is this bad person aiming to do? How are they going to do it? And how do they see their plan unfolding? And who are they going to use to do that? Because they're going to issue orders to all of their minions to do things, because they're only one person. They're not all powerful. I really hate having all powerful, like ninja, bad guy, mega death lord type, perfectionistly bad people. I think that's boring. So he's got minions, or she's got minions. That bad person's going to and do things, cause things to happen, and the world around them is going to respond. So maybe our poor old tribal groups get pushed off their land into the hinterlands, which releases some control over the monsters, and now the monsters are replicating rapidly or something, and that's going to cause all kinds of drama. This guy's under the impression that he can just eventually just blow them all away with modern weaponry, and the monsters will be subjugated and destroyed and purged. He may be wrong about that, so maybe you let him get all the way to the end of his plot. His plan is wrong. Like, he's imperfect. It's a horrible situation now. The monsters are on the rise. Their players are going to have to find a way to get these people back to do their rights, to suppress the monsters. Maybe at this point they find out about the death dealer blind ninjas who keep the undead in check, or maybe the undead are used, and maybe they've got to work with the townsfolk and these people to suppress this. I'm not sure. So this kind of spiderweb way of building settings, I think, is fun. It'd be interesting to hear what everyone else thinks. Is this something that you would do yourself? I'm just checking if there's any interesting chat out there. If you run tabletop role-playing games, have you ever built a game like this? If you have, let me know, because I haven't seen anyone really talk about it. And I'd like to see more ideas on this. And I think it's the kind of thing that's worthy of like a really long discussion. Love to find some people to chat about it. So I think that's probably enough from me. I've done a setting twice. Unless I see suddenly people in chat throwing ideas at me, I will probably call it about there. But hopefully you found that interesting. And I do, I'm really keen to see what anyone says. So I'll give you a couple of seconds in case there's any typing, because it can be a delay. It's looking pretty quiet. That must mean it's time to end the stream. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, want to hear more about it, would like to have perhaps some kind of group chat, let me know. I'd be keen to hear from you. Until then, I think it's time to say goodnight, and I will catch up with you soon. And if you're normally someone who watches Factorio, you've lasted a very long time to make it this far, and I will, of course, be streaming some more Factorio in the near future as well. So until then, good night.